It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the movies of September 14th, 2001. But, of course, before we eventually get to those movies, we kind of have to talk about what happened 3 days prior to that. And kind of my original plan with the show was to talk about the significant events that happened around these particular weeks, and I did it for a little bit, but I just honestly forgot to do. I just honestly really did not feel the need to really do them unless they were really important, significant events. And honestly, obviously, I can't really forget about this moment. Like nobody else can really forget this moment when, on September 11th, 2001, we had a massive terrorist attack on America. 19 terrorists hijacked 4 commercial airliners that were scheduled to go from various places, New England and the Mid-Atlantic regions of the East Coast to California. The first 2 planes hit the World Trade Center in New York, and essentially those buildings are no longer here anymore. And then the third one was hit the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and then the fourth one hit a rural part of Somerset, Pennsylvania, which there is the September 11th Memorial, which I actually have been to. I went there a couple years ago when we were on our way down to Ocean City. We drove past there, went there actually on the anniversary of September 11th. And I've kind of talked about how this day was important in my life, too, and how, like, to be honest with you, when I was like 12 years old when this happened, and honestly, it didn't hit me until months later. It's not even months later, just days later, when I realized how important this really was. Because I've talked about it before, how on that day, I was in middle school, I think. Yeah, middle school, I think. I think it was in middle school, because if I'm not mistaken. But everyone went home early, and I thought, okay, I was a 12-year-old kid. I really didn't want to go to school, honestly. So I thought, okay, I'll just use that time to go outside and play and ride around on my scooter. I'll drive around the park, the little area where we parked the car at. And it didn't take me until later on that day to realize how significantly that day was. And kind of like everybody else, it kind of changed my view kind of changed everything pretty much. Like, this 3,000 people lost their lives in what is still the most deadly terrorist attack in human history, and essentially has ignited the war on terror that we've been kind of dealing with for much of the last 20 years. But so of course everyone was on edge. Everyone was kind of scared to go outside for a number of days and weeks, and in a way, like, of course, obviously, it's a day that we'll never forget here in the U.S., and pretty much all of us here in America will never forget that day, because it is such a tragic day for the country. But you might be thinking to yourself, well, because this happened, clearly the box office and the movie theaters weren't doing money whatsoever, because, nobody really wanted to go outside and see movies because of the situation that was going on right now. You would think that, but you'd actually be kind of surprised by that. Yeah, believe it or not, the weekend box office actually moved up compared to the year before. In 2000, the overall box office gross was $53 million. The weekend after September 11th, they went up to $65 million. Now, none of these movies that we're going to talk about here in just a little bit were massive hits. But then again, also keep in mind that the year before was not a great weekend at the box office either. I think the highest grossing movie that came out that weekend in 2000 only grossed about $5 million. This weekend, $9 million, which is a vast improvement, but at the same time, it isn't really saying a whole lot in particular. But yeah, this particular weekend was very, very interesting, considering everything that just happened the days before, how everybody was feeling around this point. I mean, it was really a tough time for a lot of us, for obvious reasons. I mean, when you really look back on it and you realize that there were that sports, basically everything shut down before. This was like, for a lot of people, this was before we had like the big. For some of the people out there who've been watching this, who probably weren't even around when this happened, this was kind of COVID-19 before COVID-19. I mean, everything just stopped for a good number of days. TV shows stopped. Places closed down, stores closed down. There was not really a whole lot for people out there because they were afraid for their lives, and rightfully so. We were in a very unusual situation here that a lot of people hadn't seen since the day when Pearl Harbor was attacked. I mean, moments like these are days that we always remember, and it was really a very interesting time for a number of different reasons. I mean, think about this. When when this happened, the NFL basically had no choice but to halt the game, but to postpone the games that were coming up that weekend. Not because they thought it was in the best interest, but because they were going to keep going up until the New York football teams, the Jets and the Giants, basically said, we can't play in these conditions. I mean, the building where the Jets and Giants do their business is literally, you can literally see where the Twin Towers were. So how is anybody supposed to take concentration into that while you have that going on here? So, and it also didn't help that also around about almost 40 years before when this happened, on the day that JFK died, Paul Tagliabue, who was still the commissioner of the NFL in 2001, basically decided that despite this tragic event where our president was just killed, and 48 hours later, the NFL forced them to play their regularly scheduled games, which definitely left a lot of people very uncomfortable that Tagliabue made that decision. So I think he realized that and basically said, yeah, you're right, we cannot play after an event like this. So everyone had their bye weeks the following week, and so basically everybody had to play the rest of their games starting the next week, over the course of the next couple of weeks and months. And so, like, that's how important this event was, and it's definitely something that we will never forget as a nation. And honestly, anyone who lived through it really will never forget it. It's one of those days that we hope will never happen again, and hopefully that is the case overall. But I've talked about this day long enough. I mean, I'm already going on 7 minutes now talking about this day in particular. But this is a very significant event that happened, and this is one that really kind of changed everything, because there were a lot of movies that were supposed to come out around this time that the studios had to scramble to move around and basically push off to the side because they had stuff in there that they did not feel comfortable putting out. Like, of course, Sony had that famous Spider-Man poster where Spider-Man's eyes are looking at the World Trade Center, and they had that great teaser trailer that unfortunately is banned now. But then they also had a couple movies at Disney, Bad Company and Big Trouble, which had to move. I think Big Trouble was actually supposed to come out a couple of weeks later after this particular weekend, but they had to push those back into 2002, and yeah, a lot of things had to change around here. A lot of things were scrambling around, and it took a lot of people a lot of time to get back to it. I mean, in particular, I think the first person in television that basically said we have to get back to work was David Letterman, because he came back on the air less than a week after the September 11th attacks, and slowly but surely, everything kind of went back to normal. There were a couple little snags here and there. There were a couple moments where there was a lot of worries and concerns, specifically with NBC when they had the anthrax attack a couple weeks after this, and everybody had to evacuate the building. And it was a tough time. It was a very, very rough time for a lot of people around then, and especially in the world of entertainment, because a lot of these people had never been around for an event like this, and it was really, really significant in a number of different ways. And like I said, I've covered this before. I've talked about my overall remembering of the 9/11 attacks. I did a video a couple years ago talking about it. If you want to go check that out, I'll have a link to it in the corner right up there, or over here. I always keep forgetting I have the front-facing camera, and I can't really tell where the card goes, but it's either going to be in one of these sections here. If not, just go down below. The link will be there. So yeah, so that's where we were at this point. So 2 movies came out. Let's get actually back to the movies, because 2 movies came out this particular weekend, and really, I don't think they really had any other choice for these particular movies, because neither one of them really had anything too significant and that related to what's happened. So I guess they felt like, okay, we'll just put these out here. I don't know if we're going to make any money for it, but we'll see what we can do. So let's take a look at both of these movies, and we'll start off with the big new release of the weekend, and that is Keanu Reeves in Hardball. So in Hardball, you have Keanu Reeves playing a bright, educated, handsome guy whose promising future was wrecked by his gambling addiction, which drags him into heavy drinking and petty crime, but worst of all, the stifling grip of loan shark bookies. Desperate for a loan, he agrees to stand in for a lawyer friend as coach of the Chicago Ghetto Little League baseball team, his sense of pride becoming the boys' sole idol in competition, plus their attractive teacher, played by Diane Lane, motivate Connor, but the crushing loan problem rather requires leaving town. And, I think the trailer pretty much sums it up right there. This is pretty much just Bad News Bears for a new generation, and a much more and a more adult Bad News Bears, a more serious Bad News Bears, if you will, because it's more serious than the original Bad News Bears. The original Bad News Bears is a comedy, and a really great comedy, but it does have those little brief flashes of moments where they do go for a little bit more of a dramatic edge, but it's never to the point that this movie particularly is. This is more of a movie that's basically a dramedy, and like I said, you have Keanu Reeves, Diane Lane, John Hawkes, Michael B. Jordan stars in this, in one of his, I believe this is one of his earliest film roles, if I'm not mistaken, if not his first one. Let me see here. Yeah, this is the first one he's been in. He's been in a couple of other TV shows, like he had a cameo on The Sopranos, and in his first year, as well as the CBS Cosby Show that was on in the 90s, but this is his first big screen appearance, and I think the movie itself is fine for what it is, but it definitely feels like a film that very much has a lot of that thing that we've seen done in various sports movies like this. I mean, this is pretty much Bad News Bears. It's the Mighty Ducks. It's Major League. It's a lot of these movies where the underdog team has to go in and be the champions that they can be, and motivates the team not only gets motivated, but the coach gets motivated, and they have this big moment at the end where, you know, everybody has to basically like come together when it matters the most, and you know, it's pretty much a story we've seen done to death. But I like the little twists that they do throw in here. They do throw some curveballs in here that's just like, okay, I didn't expect to see that coming, so I'll give you credit for that, because there are moments where the movie does have a happy ending, but it also has kind of a sad ending too. Something happens to one of the characters in the movie, and it's just a tragic event, and it's just it really is like, it really does take you into a sense of reality here, because like it really does show the humanity of the characters when this particular moment happens in here. It happens before the big game too, so there's a lot of questions of whether or not, when this person dies, do they want to continue on? Should they continue on? And they eventually do, and not surprisingly, they win the championship. But I do like the little curveballs that they throw in there for you. They don't really go down the pathway that you think it does, even though most of the story does. That little curveball they throw at the end there actually helps the movie give it its own little distinctive personality to it, its own unique edge to it. And for that, I give it a lot of credit for that. So I can't really say it's a great movie overall, but because of those little moments like that, and because the acting overall is very good, I have to give him points for that as well, because I think it works in the film's favor. I think it is a very solid film. Not a great film by any means, but certainly not a bad film by any means either. I think it works fine for what it is. If you can get past the very much generic storyline that this movie takes with it, I think you can handle it for what it is. It's a fine movie for what it is, but it's not one I'm going to say you must check it out. I'm saying, like, if you want to see a good Keanu Reeves movie that didn't get the proper attention it deserves, definitely check this one out. I think it's definitely worth the watch. So with that said, let's move on to our last movie that we have here, and that is The Glass House. So in this movie is a psychological mystery thriller, which also stars Diane Lane, who was also in Hardball. But it tells the story of two siblings who go to live with friends of their parents as the oldest of the siblings start to get suspicious of the family's friends' patriarchy. And, believe it or not, this is actually not the first movie to have the title The Glass House. I think there's, like, literally 4 movies with this exact title. And I think one of them was actually released in theaters 15 years later. It's just like I guess the Glass House is a generic-ass title, so I guess we gotta take that. But it's a movie that is not really all that memorable the more you think about it, despite too good of a cast for this. Lily Sobieski, Diane Lane, Stellan Skarsgård, Bruce Dern, Chris Noth. The director of this is Daniel Sackheim, who's gone on to have a prolific television career as a director, directing episodes of The Walking Dead, The Americans. He also did Law & Order, X-Files. Like, he's a good director overall. And Wesley Strick, who gave us the great Martin Scorsese remake of Cape Fear 10 years ago, I mean, this is a good team all around here, but there's nothing about this movie that really works when it's all said and done. It's a movie that just really feels like a film that you know what's coming. You know what the twists are going to be. You know what the foreshadowing is going to be. You know who the bad guy is. You know who the hero's got to be. You know, you got to have that big twist at the end. And honestly, I think people were getting sick and tired of it because it quickly crashed and burned at the box office. It didn't do any money whatsoever. And, they apparently had like 74 minutes worth of footage that the studio didn't even want, because they had no intentions on having this movie around here, and it's been considered lost media. But think about that. The original cut of this was 3 hours long. Who the hell is going to sit in this movie for 3 hours and watch this movie when you have clearly nothing here that even warrants is that much of a running time? They took out 74 minutes of this movie, and at 106 minutes, it still feels really, really long. Like, really, like it's a terrible, terrible movie. And you know, like I said, this came days after September 11th, and some people actually use that kind of as a criticism to the film itself, criticizing the film's violence and the timing of the release. And a lot of critics saw this as the first film they saw after they got back to work. And, you know, I can see where they're coming from. I don't know if I'm going to blame the 9/11 attacks on the movie being bad. It's just a bad movie. It just wasn't a movie that was executed well. It didn't deliver anything that interesting that make people really want to go see it. And there's just nothing about it that's worth it when it's all said and done. It's a lackluster movie on a number of different levels. It's a type of movie that usually would be in a dumping ground month like January I was going to say Wednesday, but in the month of August. But they put it out in September, and came and went. Nobody really remembers it, and there's probably a good reason for it. So that is The Glass House. And so on that note, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies, and because of what had happened, like I said, a couple of days before this, next weekend's not really all that interesting, because there was one movie that was supposed to come out the weekend after this, and that was Big Trouble, but that got pushed back because of stuff that was in the movie that kind of was seen as not appropriate for the time. So we only have one movie to look at, and it's a doozy. Mariah Carey's Glitter, which the movie itself probably is not as bad as the way that the film was marketed. And I mean, not because of the way the movie was marketed, but the way that Mariah Carey was acting. And we'll just delve into that when we get to the next episode. So we'll check it out then. But until then, thank you so much for watching. And if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the place on the next page. Check out the previous episode. And also don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this on this channel. And then on Time About the Movies Flashback, we'll take a look at a couple movies, 4 movies in particular. We have Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jim Belushi in Red Heat, as we're going back to June 17th, 1988. We also have John Candy and Dan Aykroyd in The Great Outdoors, Susan Sarandon and Kevin Costner in the baseball comedy Bull Durham, and also A World Apart. 4 films we'll look at next time on Time About the Movies Flashback, which should be coming up next, right after this.